Welcome to Motherhood. I'm Dr. Christina Hibbert, here to help you overcome, to become, and to flourish in this ever-changing experience we call motherhood. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most important aspects of motherhood, which is our mom mental health, emotional health, and wellness. We've got a fabulous expert here who focuses her work on maternal mental health. We're going to talk to her in just a minute, and we're going to talk about how we can keep that maternal mental health going, not just in pregnancy and postpartum, but also as we grow through the seasons of our life as a mom. So stick around for today's episode because you'll be learning some tools that can help you specifically to overcome all those challenges we face each day and all those questions that we have and those doubts that we have about ourselves. But I want to thank you for joining us first, as you do each week here on Motherhood, to grow through motherhood with us, as we like to do here, and for joining us online at my website at drchristinahibbert.com, where you can find all kinds of resources related to what we'll be talking about today. I have a lot of maternal mental health resources that are free and easy to use, videos, and all kinds of things on there, so be sure to check that out, as well as join us on social media. It's been such a pleasure to connect with so many of you through Instagram and through Facebook, especially through my Facebook page, Dr. Christina Hibbert, and through our Facebook group, Growing Through Motherhood. I think I get a new request at least one or two every day, so it's great because it's growing every day. It's a place where we can stay connected and look out for upcoming posts that are going to help us to work through whatever we're going through and get to know each other better and support each other. That's what that place is all about. So join us online and on social media so we can connect and keep growing together. Now, in order to talk about this topic today, maternal mental health, it's first of all important for us to think about, just to stop and take notice of your own mental health, your own emotional health. And you might be thinking, well, how do I know what my mental health or emotional health is? We're going to talk more about that as we get into the show. But first of all, I want you to ask a few questions to yourself. Number one, how satisfied are you with your life right now? Do you feel confident in the way that you're mothering and how your family is being raised and how they're doing? Do you struggle with that ever? Are you feeling joyful throughout the day, or at least in moments? Are you able to handle the stresses of being a mom, which is such a huge part of being a mom? And if not, what would you say are some of your biggest struggles? Where do you struggle the most? And now I would say that most of us, whether you answered, yes, I am joyful, I'm great, I don't have any struggles. Well, obviously, we all have struggles, right? So you might have a really big struggle right now, like maybe you're experiencing depression or anxiety, or maybe you are going through postpartum depression or mood disorder, or maybe you're experiencing a loss or some kind of life change. Or it might just be that you can say, well, most of the time I'm doing pretty well, but I have my moments. I get really frustrated with the kids and I don't know what to do, and so I yell too much. Or I'm so tired, I just can't get enough rest and I don't know what to do because I feel like I just can't handle things. Or, just the daily things that pop up, the stress that comes from your child has a problem and you have to handle it, right? Sometimes it can feel like we are literally holding all the weight of the world on our shoulders, and it's all up to us to handle it and to handle it well. And we're going to talk today about how first of all, that's not true. We don't have to handle all of those things, and we don't have to do everything perfectly, and it's impossible to do so. But it's important for us to keep taking notice of how we're doing and check in with ourselves regularly. And I think as moms, we get so busy and so overwhelmed with whatever life is bringing us that we just don't take enough time to do that. So that's one thing I want today to be for, to listen as we talk about this topic, to think for yourself, does that apply to me? Am I going through something like that? I mean, I know that for myself, I go up and down. I have those times where I feel like everything's going pretty well and I don't have too much to complain about. And then other times, like just this past week, where I hit the wall and I feel like, oh my gosh, my kids are driving me crazy again and I'm going to lose it on them. And I have to beg my husband, just take them away. I need a break. I'm going crazy. But I also can remind myself that, hey, it's already past the middle of summer and I've made it this far without going crazy. So I think I'm doing pretty darn well, right? So hopefully we can learn also to pat ourselves on the back and see the good in what we're doing as well as we talk about how to protect and strengthen our mental and emotional health today. So I am excited to introduce our guest today, Dr. Kat, I should say, Dr. Kat. And tell me how to pronounce your name. I have never even asked you your last name.
My full name is Katayun Kayeni. So
Kayeni,
that's why I go by Dr. Kat.
Exactly. I mean, it's such a beautiful name, Katayun Kayeni. So what origin is that name?
It's an old Persian name. I'm half Iranian and half Middle American, Midwestern American.
So beautiful. I've always called you Kat, so I just have never had to actually pronounce your last name out loud. But Kayuni, is that right?
Kayeni.
Okay. So you can find out more about her on her website, which is easy to find, momandmind.com. But let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Kat first, as before we get into things. She is the creator and host of the fabulous new podcast called Mom and Mind. And I was fortunate enough to be a recent guest on her podcast. I hope you'll go to her website, momandmind.com, and check it out. She talks about all things maternal mental health there, and including for dads as well. And she's a psychologist specializing in maternal mental health after having gone through her own challenges with maternal mental health, and she'll share some of those today. She works with her county and their maternal mental health work group, and she's their resident subject expert. She helps to get the county and local health care providers trained in order to offer maternal mental health sensitive care, which is so important. And you are in California?
Southern California.
Southern California, right. So, all right. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here and happy to be here and share whatever I can with your listeners to hopefully help them think more deeply about how they're doing. And if they feel like they could use some help after they hear what we talk about, then they can reach out and get that help.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And that's one thing we do want to stress today is, as you're listening and as I was suggesting, to take it all in and see how you're really doing and maybe get a little bit honest with yourself about maybe where you're struggling. Hopefully you'll see by the end of the show if you might need to get some extra help. And we're going to talk, Dr. Kat's going to help us. We're going to talk about how you can find that good help and when you might need it and how to find the right person, right?
Yeah.
So let's start off by talking about maternal mental health. It's a broad topic. And usually we break it down. We talk about, pregnancy, postpartum, and different kinds of mental health. But let's talk about, when we're thinking of, we're not talking about maternal mental illness. We're talking about maternal mental health. So how would you kind of describe what that looks like? What are some of the, first of all, the signs and the basics of knowing if you're experiencing health and knowing when maybe you're not?
Right. So specifically as you said, maternal mental health covers quite a few topics, and that can range anywhere from preconception to conceiving or trying to conceive, fertility issues, pregnancy, loss of pregnancy, postpartum. That's a pretty vast range of time and experience that someone could be thinking or feeling not quite themselves. And that would be one of the signs, actually, that something might be going on, is if someone's not quite feeling like themselves during this period of time. And as you said, we go through periods of time of stress, and certainly, there can be really heightened stress during any period of this reproductive period of time, trying to become pregnant, keep a pregnancy, have a child. Keep all of those things going. So certainly stress can be experienced, and there can be quite a spectrum of experience, actually, anywhere from very mild stress to significant stress to mild symptoms of depression or anxiety to very severe symptoms that might require a lot more support. So it's a broad range of stuff. And I just want to really make sure that your listeners understand that as we get into some of the details, when we think about maternal mental health, postpartum depression, that oftentimes that is a scary thing for someone to hear, or they may have some association to a very, very severe type of maternal mental health issue that's been blasted across the media or the news and might not really understand what it means to be dealing with depression or anxiety during pregnancy and postpartum. So there's a range.
Yeah, I'm so glad you put it that way because I think it helps our listeners to understand that it's not just, you're either healthy or you're not. It's this,
Right.
there's a lot of different gradations along that line of being healthy or not. And also that line of wherever you are in your motherhood journey. I mean, we do have such a broad audience here. We have all ages and stages. So, of course,
Right.
when we're talking about, pregnancy or postpartum, you might be beyond that, but there's still so much we can take away from that and learn about our mental health, no matter which stage we're talking about. In fact, I'm thinking of so many of my friends who said to me, years after they were done giving birth, having children, saying, yeah, I think I had postpartum depression for like 10 years straight, right?
Right.
Because they had a bunch of
I
kids
hear that
and
all
they
the
never
time.
got it treatment. And so, this can be something that starts early on and continues, or it can be something that starts up later in life as well. So let's talk about how would you define being mentally healthy, first of all, and then we'll go into a few of the signs and symptoms of some of these disorders we're talking about.
Sure. So, if you're feeling mostly like yourself, if you feel like you're functioning through the day, that you're able to get stuff done that you normally get done, if you feel like you're still interested in doing things that you've always liked to do, even though, maybe you don't have the time, but you still are like, I'd like to get into, back to crocheting or whatever it is, that you're able to, pardon me, you don't feel foggy, you're able to think clearly, of certainly the moms who are dealing with pregnancy and postpartum, their sleep is often disturbed. So even with some disturbed sleep, you're still feeling okay, not 100% necessarily, but you're feeling like you can get through the day and,
You can cope. Yeah.
you can cope. Yeah. And you're able to do the things that you need to do to get through the day without struggle.
Right. And I would include healthy relationships, right? Like
Sure.
you're building those relationships, or they aren't extremely suffering. Like one of the diagnostic factors for diagnosing something like depression or anxiety is that it significantly impacts these areas of your life, like your work functioning or your home functioning or your relationships. So that's another way to know if you're feeling healthy or not. And that doesn't mean that you have perfect relationships, but just that you're
Sure.
able to cope with that too.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So
So
you're feeling okay.
yeah, you're feeling okay. And so why is it so hard for us moms to admit that we're not okay? That's a big question.
Oh, wow. I don't know if we have enough time for that.
I know, right? There's so many reasons.
It's a huge, well, there's so many things that go into creating our idea of how we're supposed to be during pregnancy and motherhood. And a lot of it are forces unseen, things that we learned very early on about what it means to be a mom and what it means to be nurturing and what it means to be loving. And unfortunately, a lot of times that includes being perfect, feeling awesome all the time. These really, really strange and unreasonable expectations of anybody at any time, let alone someone who's pregnant or postpartum. Don't get me wrong, there are people who do feel that way, but there's a significant chunk, a number, about 15 to 20% of moms who do not feel that way, do not feel great and good, and do not feel like they can function, like all of the things that we were just talking about feeling healthy. The moms who are not feeling well and not feeling themselves are healthy are having significant difficulties functioning throughout the day. They may not even want to be connected to their children. Sometimes it goes the opposite. Sometimes they're so worried about their kids that they cannot let them out of their sight. They have a lot of difficulty with someone else taking care of the child. So we can get into more specifics there in terms of symptoms and whatnot. But to answer your original question, there's a lot of pressure to feel great, to look great, to be happy all the time, to all of the sudden know everything you're supposed to do as a mother, that somehow some switch gets flipped and you're like, cool, I got this. I can do everything,
Right.
which happens nowhere ever.
Exactly. And as they grow too, I mean, not only just
Oh my
becoming a mom,
gosh,
but
yeah.
then in the different stages, like, oh, great, now I have to handle a teenager or a young adult or an adult making choices I don't approve of or
Right.
whatever. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
tough one.
I mean, this is a learn on the job forever.
Yeah,
It unfortunately, like, yeah, so many people say, this doesn't come with a manual, being a parent. And
right.
it certainly doesn't. It certainly doesn't. And unfortunately and fortunately, there's so much information out there about how to do things and what to do in certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very helpful. And also can be very confusing and overwhelming for a mom who's trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I do this? Well, I'll consult Mr. Internet and he'll give me 5,000 different ways to do it. And how do I choose which one is best?
Yeah, so
So these
true.
are some of the factors that go into making moms feel overwhelmed
Yeah,
and alone
yeah,
because, oh, it looks like everyone else is doing it right. How come I can't?
right.
Um,
So let's talk about some of these things that you've heard and I've heard so many times from moms when they come in to talk to us. So maybe you are listening to this right now and you're thinking, I don't think I'm doing okay, you know? And as you said, Kat, you said that up to 20%, you know, in pregnancy and postpartum are going to have these changes in your emotions. These, you know, you might be experiencing depression or anxiety or OCD or PTSD or something like this. And those numbers seem there. If you think about that, moms listening right now, that's 1 in 5 moms. That's a lot that are going to be struggling early on. And yes, there is that extra vulnerability during that time because of the shifts in hormones and because of the fact that, hello, you just carried a baby and had a baby and now your whole life has
right,
changed.
right.
But, you know, that vulnerability can last into motherhood, into the motherhood years. And as we said before, if untreated, those types of issues can either worsen or last for years. And I just want to say one more point to help all the moms out there thinking that they're not sure if they want to get help is that we know from the research that one of the most important factors in determining a child's future behavioral and cognitive development and how they turn out is a mom's mental health, and that maternal depression is, and not just postpartum, but maternal depression is the number one predictor of cognitive and behavioral problems in the child. So we do need to be healthy. We need to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
So let's
Right.
talk about what this sounds like when we're not feeling healthy and some of the themes that we hear about all the time.
Right. So, from a lot of the moms that come in for individual sessions and into the group that I host, both pregnant and postpartum moms, most every week, at least twice, I hear someone saying that they're a bad mother.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about like, I leave my child alone for hours at a time and don't attend to them. They're saying things like, oh, my child's crying and I have to go to the bathroom. I don't know what I should do. Should I put them down? I'm a bad mom for even wanting to have 5 minutes alone.
Yeah.
Things like really, really high pressure on themselves, that if they don't do everything just perfectly correctly, that somehow they're being a bad mother.
Right.
Somehow they're failing at motherhood when they can't figure out what's going on with their child, you know.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's had multiple children, you know that sometimes they just cry and you can go down the list of the million things to check and they can still cry. But for a mom who's in a really vulnerable state, sleep deprivation, honestly, well, I can get back to that, but that's a
It's
huge
huge.
factor.
Oh, yeah.
Well, sleep deprivation really, really changes how your brain works. And so anyhow, for a mom who's just had a new baby, doing this for the first time or the second time or the third time, whichever, feeling very tired, it's very easy to feel like you're doing a bad job.
Yeah.
Because when you're deprived or when you're in a more vulnerable state, feeling depressed or anxious, that changes the way your brain functions. It
Yeah.
changes how you think. It literally changes your thoughts and they become distorted. Your thoughts can often feel really black or white, like I'm doing a horrible job. That would be an example of kind of like, well, everything's bad because I don't feel like I can do this thing right now.
Right.
So thoughts get really generalized and very, very judgmental, self-judgmental. And so that feeling of I'm a bad mom, I'm not doing this right, I'm not doing enough for my child, is really, really hard to shake.
Right.
Because it sounds so true when it comes into your mind, and it sounds so loud. It's just like, it's just there. And because it's there and loud and big and feels bad, we often mistake it for the truth in that moment. And it's not.
Yeah.
Like I said, most moms who are having this, I feel like a bad mom feeling, are having thoughts that are scary for them. Like you mentioned before, intrusive thoughts, that would be a sign of a high level of anxiety or potentially OCD. Having a thought that comes in like a flash, could be scary, could be like, a very common one is like, what if I drop my baby? Sometimes moms who have really very, very intense rage during their postpartum period. And this is something I experienced too. I had I had anxiety and depression, but a really, really intense rage that I didn't know where it was coming from. I would get so frustrated. It flashed in my mind to throw my child against the wall. Who thinks that?
Right.
That was
Then
that
you're
was
even
the initial
harder on
thought
yourself.
that comes in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So the thought was like, who thinks that? Oh my gosh, I can never tell anybody that I had that thought. And I had other very scary thoughts as well. But as soon as that thought comes in, nobody can even, someone could have walked into my house and just seen me doing a perfect job from the outside.
Right.
But inside was where the sort of chaotic feeling was, and those intense feelings of anger and frustration and thoughts that I didn't know where they were coming from.
Yeah.
And my gosh, so so the thoughts that follow are like, who would think that about their child?
Yeah.
What kind of mom would do that? I must be a bad mom. So it can range from very kind of simple things from, I just need a break from my child. I must be a bad mom. I can't take them crying all the time. And get everything on a spectrum, to having really intense, sometimes rageful feelings towards your own child. And then, oh my gosh, the guilt. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the guilt.
The guilt
it
is
just
huge.
floods in, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is kind of an example of one of the types of intrusive thoughts that a mom could have. Obviously, I didn't want to hurt my child. I would never hurt my child,
Yeah, of course.
But I didn't know what was going on. So who wants to tell anybody about that?
Right. Well, and that's part of the problem is that, like you said, somebody looking on the outside might not even see anything wrong. In fact, they might be looking up to you like, oh my gosh, she's so pulled together, or look how she's handling it all. And you inside are having this war. You're at war with yourself. And about how bad you are. And like you said, this can come on any spectrum. And this can continue. Obviously, we all know this. We've all felt like a bad mom at one time or another, throughout our motherhood journey. And I think you're right that when we're in times of vulnerability, that's what you said, that's when this can come up. And if we don't, then we don't want to talk about it because we're embarrassed, or we just feel like people won't get it, or, so we feel like we have to kind of put on that face and be that person that's fine, even if we're not. And it becomes, that feeds into the problem, right? Then we're not actually getting out those feelings out and dealing with them. And it just can keep those thoughts going strong.
Well, and part of it too is the other thing I see a lot, which is, well, if I'm having these thoughts, then they make me feel crazy, or I feel like I'm crazy, or I'm going crazy. I hear that almost in every group. Like a new mom that comes in, by the end, she says, okay, great. Now I know I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one.
So big.
It's because it's so isolating. And you do, when you're in your head that much, it does feel like you're the only one. It does feel like you're crazy. It does feel like, oh my gosh, I can't tell anybody about this because what would they say? What would they do? And again, that can be on a spectrum from having very, very intense thoughts of harming yourself or harming your child, or but something that makes you feel, the thoughts themselves make you feel anxious, like you would never do it. Those thoughts, to something like, I just want my baby to sleep, and I yelled at it to sleep. I hear that a lot too. I yelled at my baby, why won't you just sleep? And then I felt bad and horrible.
It's so hard. And I feel like I've had to work through this personally too. And I think all moms have, we go through this, and then I think as we go through a new season, or we get another child, or we, go through a difficult time, we have to remind ourselves of, okay, I am not what I think, and I am not what I'm telling myself, and there's more to it than I'm letting myself see. I mean, I had to just redo all that, even after years of feeling pretty good about myself as a mom and as a person. But after my concussion, I had to remind myself that it's okay that I have literally been feeling like I can do nothing for 2 months, and I feel like a terrible person or a terrible mom. And my husband's like, that's not true. That's not true. But again, when we say it out loud, then hopefully someone else can help remind us that's not true. And we're not telling ourselves the full story there.
That's so true. It's not the full story. It's how you feel in that moment based on, I think one thing I try to really emphasize to the people that I meet with who are coming in for help is context. It's not that you all of a sudden are just a horrible mom. Let's think about what's going on. Have you slept? Have you had food today? Have you had any time to yourself where you weren't being touched all the time? Like, I mean, kids are constantly on us. And sometimes we need a break, and that's totally okay.
Yes.
That's totally okay.
Totally okay.
So what's the context? Did something happen in your family? Is there a stressor going on? What are the concentric circles of pressure on you right now that could be contributing to how you feel right now? And once we kind of get into that and understand that, okay, well, there's this and this and this and that, and those things are impacting my mood. Okay, well, maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe I'm not a bad mom for being stressed out in this moment. But because the thoughts come in sometimes so fast and sometimes so loud, or the feelings are so overwhelming, it's really hard to remember that there's potentially a list of things that are contributing to that moment, as opposed to what we walk away from that moment sometimes is, well, I must be a bad person. I must be a bad mother. Right. If I can't tolerate my child crying all the time, I must be bad. Well, no, you must be human.
Yes. Right.
You must be human.
You must be human. I love that. That we are human still, after all, and we do deserve a break, and we do deserve to have the feelings that we feel. And just because you have a feeling too doesn't make you that feeling. Just because you feel angry or upset or frustrated doesn't mean that you're something bad. I think people mistake that, and they think if we have a quote negative feeling that makes us a bad or negative person, but it's just still a feeling, right?
It is right.
So let yourself feel it.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So
it's hard to do.
It's hard to do. We're going to talk in a minute about some of the ways we can do this. And I just want to say for all you listeners, we're not going into all of the different disorders that can happen, like depression and anxiety and, OCD and PTSD. These are some of the common ones in pregnancy and postpartum, even psychosis, which is very rare. We've had a couple of shows talking about those. So if you want more information on those specific disorders and what the symptoms are and what you might be looking for, go look up one of the past episodes on those kinds of postpartum mental health symptoms and disorders. But, Kat was mentioning some of those things. And again, it's that spectrum of what's going on. And we all have worry. We all have some anxiety. And we're going to all have down days. But again, it's that extremeness that makes it into something like depression or actually an anxiety disorder or something where you actually really, really do need treatment. And, also if you're feeling, like you're going to harm yourself or your child, definitely seek help immediately. Go to the hospital, call your healthcare provider immediately. But most of us are somewhere below that phase and kind of fluctuate on a day-to-day basis on that whole scale, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And it's also, sometimes I feel like therapy is like I'll do that if it gets really bad type of a thing.
Yes.
But getting the support, I think we're going to be talking about some tips on how to take care of yourself. Those kinds of things can be preventative. Those kinds of things can help people to not get to a state where they feel so out of control. Right. Like you were describing, the more severe types of symptoms.
Right. The earlier that you start doing these things we're going to go into next, the better off you'll be. Right. So remember that, everybody. Now, before we do touch on those tips, I just want to take a minute to just talk about the stigma and how that impacts us too. Because we've talked about feeling like a bad mom. I can't tell anybody. I have to put on a face. I have to be fine. And that a lot of that goes back to the stigma, not only of mental illness, but also of just not being the person that you think you should be and feeling like everybody's judging you. I mean, what do you want to say about stigma?
Well, yeah, particularly as it pertains to mothers.
Yeah.
I think, like you were describing, there's a stigma around mental health complications anyway. So,
Right.
what does it mean to be depressed or anxious? It's you're this other person. Well, it's pretty common actually, depression and anxiety, but
Yes.
so,
Most common
very,
things that
very,
women go through, really.
yeah.
Anxiety is like
Um,
1 in 3, and for depression, 1 in 5. I mean, it's really
it's
common. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very common. But because we don't talk about it, because we are all feeling like we're not supposed to talk about it, we're supposed to be this Hallmark card version of ourselves, especially with a child. So, what are the images that are in society about pregnancy and motherhood? You're glowing, you're happy. You're doing what you're meant to do. This is what your body was built for.
Right.
You're supposed to, this is supposed to be all fulfilling, motherhood and pregnancy. So these are the messages that are out there, whether they're conscious or not, whether they're in the forefront of our mind or not. Mostly it's running in the background
Yeah.
when we are, trying to think, well, if I'm depressed, I'm going to be one of those moms. So if you start to feel anything but perfect, this is both your internal stigma, but also what's outside of you. So what are people seeing? Like, how do moms who feel depressed get portrayed in the media? How do moms who feel anxious get portrayed in society? All of those things are, that let's say a mom who's depressed, I think for the most part is I think to some fault of the media is portrayed as a mom who's crazy, who's lost it, who's
Right.
going to kill her children,
Yeah.
who how that this is an additional layer of pressure and stigma on mothers specifically,
Right.
and certainly before I knew what was going on, I had the same judgment. Well, what's wrong with her? Why can't she keep control of her kids? Or why doesn't she interact with her kids more? Like, the instantaneous judgment that comes from people who have zero clue what's going on.
Yes.
That's part of the stigma. That's part of the pressure that we feel as mothers. So why then, if we're feeling anything but perfect, would we want to tell anyone about it? Therefore, get help.
Right.
It's kind of, I don't know the right analogy, but it's hard to then feel, oh, okay, well, I'm going through something, and when people go through something, they get help. It's more like, well, something's wrong with me.
Yes.
Going back to this kind of themes that come into therapy,
Right.
or people who are having difficulty. So I believe the stigma is at least double
Yeah. For
for
moms.
moms.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because specifically for moms, that is such an issue. And I do think you're right. I mean, I know I feel that way, even though I know in my head that that it's okay to feel depressed or to seek help or whatever. I feel like I resist it for a certain amount of time, because you want
Sure.
to be fine and you want to be, quote, the strong one or the good one or the best or perfect or whatever you're trying to be. And it is tough to say, I am not doing okay. Or, yeah, my house is trashed because I just can barely get out of bed right now. I can barely cope with the basics. I mean, who wants to say that? And let's also just put out there, we're not putting those pictures on Instagram or on Facebook either. Like,
Right.
hey, look at how miserably I'm feeling. That's what the title would probably be if we had. Sometimes I go around my house and see all this stuff that's just horribly messy and disgusting. I just want to post it
Right.
just to be like, look, I don't have it
Yeah.
all together. Everybody might
No.
think that, but no, not at all.
Yeah.
So it is so hard to admit, but it's so important, because as we said before, the consequences not only to ourselves, but to our families can be great
Yeah.
if we're not well. We will not be able to cope with and help our families if we're not well. So
It's true. It's true. One of the other parts of this is identity. So as
yeah,
you're
that's a huge one.
changing and becoming a mother, your identity's changing. You have a new title.
Yeah.
You're now mom, and you weren't before. So while you're getting used to this new idea of who you are just as a mother, you can't then also become that mother.
Yeah,
That
that's
like, no,
right.
that's not me. Like that was a thought that I had. I was already a psychologist, working therapist, all this stuff when I had my postpartum depression and anxiety. I took the PHQ-9 screen, depression screen, and I lied because I was like, I know what they're asking. I'm not depressed. I can't be that lady.
Yeah.
So, a part of is us fighting against ourselves,
Yes.
not wanting to admit that something's not quite right, and that it's okay to get help for it. And that's, my mission in the world is to get on some mountaintop somewhere and scream, it's okay to get help.
I'm with you. I am with you.
Yeah.
Because it's so important. And I so appreciate you sharing that personal example of even you as a psychologist, and
I knew.
you supposedly know, but when it applies to yourself, it's hard to see, and it's hard to admit, and it's hard to want to, like you say, be, quote, that person. But you know what? I am that person, and I posted a whole thing online about I am the face of depression and anxiety because for the same reason that I want people to see that that yes, depression, anxiety, mental illness, it does not look like a crazy person. It looks like a pretty high functioning, normal person for the most part that's doing a pretty darn good job despite what this is all, what they're going through in motherhood. So let's talk about then what can we do? I mean, how can we overcome some of these pressures or stigmas or thoughts? I know there are so many ways, and we're only going to get to touch on just a couple of the most important that we feel are really going to be helpful. Right. So hopefully everybody take notes here, because here's some ideas of what you can do. So what would you say is one of the first places we need to start when we're trying to overcome some of these things?
Sleep.
Yes, 100%. I'm a fan of that. Yes.
I can get into I'll get into some of the other self-care stuff, but I think so many moms underestimate how important sleep is.
Yes.
And half the time they're struggling with like, why can't I just feel better? Well, when we take a really close look at when do you go to sleep? How long are you sleeping? Who can help? And with moms with little babies, it's so much harder.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that particular kind of sleep, the broken sleep, is the worst kind for your brain to function. It needs sleep. So I would say first take inventory on what kind of sleep are you getting, how much sleep are you getting, and who can support you to get better sleep. Can you switch off with someone? Is there a support person nearby who can come and, every once in a while, help out or take the baby for one of the feedings at least? Or do you need earplugs while your partner is taking care of the child? And sometimes just troubleshooting that. And unfortunately, one night of good sleep doesn't fix it.
Right.
It can take a couple of, I know.
It helps.
I know.
Though.
Even
it
for
helps.
me still.
Take what you can get, right? Whenever you can get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Is try and sometimes it really is renegotiating sleep at night. That something's not working, and that it's a temporary change. Sometimes partners are like, well, I have to work. And that's true. They might have to be working. But if this is a temporary change to renegotiate the sleep patterns and the sleep timing for a little bit, it can help everybody, actually.
That's really important. And I want to emphasize that to me, we need to look at it as not just even our sleep, but our family sleep. Because a lot of times, whether you're a new mom or not, the problem is that you have kids that are staying up too late or that are getting up so early, but you're not going to bed on time. You're staying up late, but your kids are getting up early. So if you look at the bigger picture of the family dynamics of what's going on, then you're going to get a real clue to what you might need to change. And sometimes it might be that your partner wants to stay up late. I mean, I had a client whose husband literally would make her stay up with him until like 4 a.m. And he didn't want to sleep because they'd been through some trauma, and he didn't really want to sleep and deal with it. And then he'd take a sleeping pill and fall asleep. And then she'd have to get up and take the kids to school, So it was like, no wonder you're experiencing major depression. You are not getting any sleep. So, sometimes, like you say, it's renegotiating those rules with people in our family and setting up a new system. And it is so important. I'm so glad you're talking about this as being the number one thing we can do.
I think so. I so.
Agree.
In terms of things that are easiest easiest to address, but maybe a little hard to do. Sleep is usually something that everyone can agree that they need.
Right.
And partners might need sleep too, if they're busy. So it's, trying to negotiate that in a different way. Yeah. So sleep, I would say, is number one.
Yeah. I'm with you.
some of the other things, and you touch on this, and I think in your newest book, is exercise and
Mm-hmm.
getting out. So it doesn't necessarily mean going on a 5 mile hike. It could be walk around the block.
Right.
Get you get change your environment. A lot of moms feel like anyways, I'll get back to exercise for just to
Mm-hmm.
talk about this, is that sometimes staying in the house feels like you're in a cave and that
Right.
you can't get out. And the longer you stay in that cave, the harder it is to get out.
Mm-hmm.
So just even a short walk around the block. It could be not even necessarily walking. It could be if you have a patio or a balcony, or an outdoor space to go outside and breathe outside. So I'm kind
Mm-hmm.
of combining those two things. But getting out and just going on a walk if you can. It doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be a marathon. 5 minutes.
Just move
Change.
in some
Just move.
way and get outside
Yeah.
if you can, and
Get outside
be in
if
the
you can.
sun if you can for a little bit too, which is also great for your mood and in the
It
nice
is. And,
weather. Yeah.
unfortunately, certainly moms who are depressed and anxious, they have people say to them all the time, well, just get out and go on a walk and you'll be fine.
You
So
know.
I want to emphasize that that is not going to fix everything. Going on a walk once is not going to fix everything. And it's not going to make you feel 100% better. But over time, with adding in maybe 1 to 2 things per week that you can do to take care of yourself, if this week it's a 5 minute walk every other day, cool.
Yeah.
If next week you can do a 5 minute walk every day, awesome. These are small, manageable things to add into your day, because as soon as we start feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to do 10 things today to take care of myself that I wasn't doing yesterday, we're not going to do it.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
small bites, small
Yes.
things that you can add in.
Start small and
Uh,
build from there. And if you really
Absolutely.
want more information on the exercise, you mentioned my book, 8 Keys to Mental Health Through Exercise, which is made to help you figure out how to actually make exercise a part of your life in a way that works for you. And again, we don't have to be strict about it or intense about it. It just has to be moving your body. It does help you feel better.
Sure.
Yeah.
And if some people are in a neighborhood or an environment where going outside is not really an option, they might have to
Yeah.
go to a gym or go to a park or go someplace safe. Even, doing something in your safe space, wherever you
Yes.
feel
At
safe
home,
enough
even. Yeah.
at home
Absolutely.
even.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. Great.
Yeah, so doing deeper breathing, slower breathing. A lot of moms feel anxious and breathe high up in their chest, slow, fast breaths, which has their mind racing and running. Just slowing down your breath. There's no magic necessarily way that you have to do it. There's a lot of different ways that you can manage your breathing.
Right.
Just taking one long, slow, deep breath can help. It's like breathing, changing your breathing is the bridge from feeling anxious and overwhelmed to getting reconnected, having your mind and body feel more connected. Just a
I
couple
love
of
that.
deep breaths.
Hmm. And I want to say, one thing that helps me is to imagine just breathing to my toes and then
Yeah.
back. And I heard this, at the recent postpartum conference we went to, I did a yoga class that was for, pregnancy and postpartum. And one thing that she had us do was actually, a lot of times we don't want to think about the bad thoughts in our head. But she said she had us actually breathe in the thing that we are not wanting to think about, like I'm a bad mom. So breathe in, I'm a bad mom. Breathe out, love for yourself. Breathe in fear of what's going on with your kids or something. Breathe out compassion or peace or whatever. And I really love that because it helps to acknowledge, and you can use the breath to kind of process through your thoughts and feelings as well. You don't have to, like you said, you can just take a
Sure.
deep breath or 2 or 10 and
Right.
feel so
Sure.
much better. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Great. Okay. What would we say
Yeah.
would be
Breathing is
next?
great. There's a lot of little things.
Yeah.
But can be huge. If you feel isolated in your home, finding a way to be socially connected,
Yes.
whether that is with friends or a community group or a church or an online support group, and there are some of those out there now. Finding some way to stay connected. Certainly, I mentioned that cave feeling that we feel stuck in our home or we feel alone. sometimes even if you don't have a group in your very own community, you can find some online through Postpartum Support International. Has some online groups there, or some of your Facebook groups or other
Growing Through
places where you
Motherhood
can.
group on
Right.
Facebook.
Absolutely.
Yep, that's right.
Feeling connected to other people, if you can. There are some people who are highly introverted and prefer to not be connected to other people. But I think what is really important is to find some way to know that you're not alone. So if that is not necessarily through one-on-one talking and conversation, or group conversations, listening to my podcast, listening to your podcast about just hearing other stories of things that people have been through so you can know for yourself, oh my gosh, I'm hearing my story in somebody else. It's not just me.
Yeah. So big. So
Even
big.
that feeling, if you can't connect to other people right now, connect through story, connect through meaning.
I love that. And
If
that
if
can come
that's
from a book too, or reading something
that
or
can come
something
from a
online.
book.
So, in our
Yeah.
last minute here, let's talk about we've talked about the importance of seeking help when we need. Obviously, as you said, there's so many other little things we can do to help ourselves. And I want everybody listening to look for my episode coming up all about self-care. We're going to talk on all those things specifically for a whole episode. So you can check that out as well. But what would you say, what advice would you give for somebody who's thinking, I probably do need to get some counseling or some professional help? And where do they begin?
They can begin with an online search. Sometimes there are really good therapists in our community and we don't know about it. Type in postpartum depression therapist. Typing in, something like that, using some words like that. And if you don't have anyone in your community, you'll probably, when you type that in, Postpartum Support International will come up, or Postpartum Progress will come up, or a website to a major organization that's doing a lot of work
Right.
on behalf of moms who are dealing with anxiety and depression during pregnancy and postpartum. Postpartum Support International specifically has a phone line you can call into, a warm line. Someone will answer return your call and help you get connected to resources in your area, or directly from their website. You can find local help from their website. I believe Postpartum Progress has something similar to that. And if you can't, as I said before, if you can't find on your own someone specifically who specializes, I do recommend, if you can, finding a specialist. If you can't, then having someone who has some experience helping moms through this period of time is very helpful. As we mentioned before, online support groups.
And finding
through PSI.
someone that you click with. Somebody
Absolutely,
that you feel
yeah.
confident in. That's really important, everybody. Yeah.
That is so true. Not just, just as the same as we gotta shop around for everything else and find what fits for us and what works for us. The same with therapists. There are very, very well-meaning therapists out there who might not be a good fit for you.
Yeah.
They may have a different style of doing therapy that doesn't work for you, or maybe they remind you of the uncle that you hate. I don't know.
Right.
So
You never know.
You never know. So,
exactly.
Keep trying. I would suggest try a couple of different therapists. Usually therapists offer some type of phone consultation, if not in-person consultation,
Right.
to get a feel for them and see if you would feel like you could connect and be helped by them.
That's so great. And that resource for Postpartum Support International, you can find them at postpartum.net. They are a fabulous resource to find any kind of help and support in your area, not just for going through pregnancy and postpartum, but really for people that work in maternal mental health in general that can really help you get connected. So thank you so much, Dr. Kat, for being here.
Thank you.
Gosh.
It was a pleasure to be here.
I
Thank
know we
you.
covered a lot in a short amount of time, but everybody visit her website and her podcast at momandmind.com so that you can hear more. And join us back here on Motherhood each week as we grow through it together. And visit my website, drchristinahibbert.com, for more resources on the things we talked about today. I hope you will all have a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.